Their father sold them like cattle. The phrase echoed in Elena's head as the scorching sun burned her skin, and the dry dust kicked up by the carriage wheels covered everything around her. The smell of parched earth, mixed with sweat and fear, flooded her senses. The muffled screams of her sisters were lost in the hot wind that carried the summer drought. The beat of her heart echoed like a distant drum, a rhythm of hope and terror. How had they reached this point? The shadow of betrayal stretched over her, heavier than the hot air that enveloped them. No one loved her, but there was still someone who would not abandon her. It was the year 1823. In a small, forgotten village among the dusty hills of the south, the sun beat down with relentless force, scorching the dry fields and the few plants that survived the rainless summer. The adobe houses, weathered by time, seemed to struggle to resist the passing of time, with their broken thatched roofs and cracked walls. The wind raised clouds of dust that invaded the empty streets, where hardly a person could be seen, all with weather-beaten faces and clothes threadbare from work and misery. In that place, the law was a luxury only the powerful could afford. Peasants, like Elena and her family, lived in the shadow of ruthless landowners who controlled every aspect of their lives. The father, once a respected man, had allowed himself to be consumed by debt and despair, selling his own daughters to pay off what he owed. An act that broke any bond of blood and dignity, a cruel reflection of the injustice that reigned at the time. Fear was a constant companion. Fear of betrayal, hunger, and violence. The women of the village whispered stories of disappearances, brutal punishments, and power casts that no one dared challenge. The injustice was palpable in the dry air, in the shifty glances, and in the calloused hands gripping work tools as the sun set. Every step was a battle for survival, and for Elena, every second was a countdown to an uncertain fate. The people were trapped in a cycle that seemed impossible to break. But amidst that hopelessness, a spark of rebellion emerged, an opportunity no one expected. Because, although no one wanted the fugitive noblewoman, there were those who believed she could be the key to changing everything. Elena was no ordinary woman. Her eyes, large and deep like dark wells, carried the weight of a lifetime of suffering, but also an indomitable spark of hope. When she walked the dusty streets, clutching the piece of cloth she used to shield her hair from the blazing sun, her hands trembled, not from fear, but from quiet determination. She didn't speak much, but when she did, her words carried the force of raw truth. Their father, Don Mateo, was a haggard man, with hunched shoulders and eyes lost in memories of better days. His face was etched with deep lines of anguish and shame. He spoke little, and when he did, his voice was hoarse, laden with guilt. He knew he was condemning his own daughters, but the debt that suffocated him seemed endless. That afternoon he sold Elena and her sisters. He looked at them as if silently asking for forgiveness, but the words never came. Beside Elena stood Rosa, her younger sister, who with her tousled hair and shy smile tried to bring a little lightness to the gloomy scene. Rosa was the living hope, the child who still believed the world could be different. "Let's run away, Elena," she whispered, clutching her sister's hand tightly, as if to prevent fate from separating them. And then there was Marcos, the mysterious revolutionary no one in the village really knew. Tall, dark-haired, and with a steady gaze, he seemed to carry a flame in his heart that wouldn't go out. Marcos didn't say much, but his gestures and the way he looked at Elena indicated that he wouldn't see her as an ordinary fugitive. He was the man who would offer a chance, a different choice, an unexpected path. Each character brought with them a piece of history, an emotion, a struggle. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across the streets, that small group prepared to face whatever lay ahead. Together or apart, it didn't matter. Life, hard and unforgiving, had brought them to this moment, and the future awaited, uncertain and full of possibilities. The days following the betrayal were like a dark shadow hanging over Elena and her family. Each dawn brought with it the whisper of danger, a rumor that grew in the town's dusty streets. Daily life, once marked by work in the fields and a few laughs in the kitchen, now transformed into a tense and anguished wait. The wind raised clouds of dust that seemed to carry with them the fear that had settled in their hearts. Elena woke up to the echo of unfamiliar footsteps outside the house and looked out the window, watching the dirt road leading to the village. She knew she couldn't trust anyone, because the betrayal had left a deep wound that made her suspicious of any kind gesture. Every moment she felt the soldiers' eyes watching, searching for traces of resistance, a reason to punish harshly. The daily routine seemed like a dangerous balancing act. As the women sewed worn clothes and the children played near the well, Elena felt the weight of silence grow. What if they decide to come tonight? Rosa asked softly, clinging to both hope and fear. Elena had no answer, because she herself was torn between the need to flee and the desire to face the fate that had marked her. The dilemma was becoming unbearable. Risk her life in an uncertain escape or stay and endure the humiliation and constant danger. Each option seemed like a dead end. On one such night, the sound of horse hooves broke the silence, and shadows moved among the nearby trees. Elena's heart was beating so hard it seemed to want to burst through her chest. Marcos, the revolutionary, then appeared like a specter in the darkness, his eyes shining with a mixture of defiance and tenderness. "We can't wait any longer," he whispered. "If you want to survive, you must come with me." The threat became more real, closer, but a new question also arose. What would happen if she trusted a stranger? Would he be a salvation or a new chain? The daily routine, with its small tasks and furtive glances, became a delicate dance between hope and fear, between courage and despair. The hours passed, and the tension grew like a storm about to break. Every step outside the house was a dangerous gamble, and every carefully spoken word could change fate. Elena knew something was about to break, that the fear-filled silence would soon have to give way to action. The stage was set for the inevitable clash. The sun continued its journey toward the horizon, and with it the shadow of a decision that would forever mark their lives. Night had fallen over the village in a dark, silent pall, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets and the whispering of the wind through the dry trees. Elena knew this was the decisive moment. Outside, the soldiers' shadows moved like specters in the gloom, while inside the small house, everyone's heart was beating with suppressed force. Marcos, his face serious and his gaze steady, approached Elena and offered her his hand. There were no unnecessary words, just a gesture laden with promise and risk. It was an act of courage and faith, a direct challenge to a destiny that seemed written by others. "Come with me," she said firmly. "You're not just a runaway. You're the hope this place needs." Elena felt everything inside her stirring. Fear, doubt, anger, and hope mingled in a whirlwind impossible to control. But as she took Marcos's hand, she felt as if a new strength coursed through her veins. It was time to face what had oppressed her for so long. As she opened the door, the night air rushed in, cold and sharp, permeated with the smell of earth dampened by a recent rain. Outside, the silence was tense, almost palpable, as if the world itself were holding its breath. The soldiers stood nearby, their flashlights creating beams of light that they searched tirelessly. But instead of running away, Elena decided to confront them. In an act no one expected, she raised her voice with the strength of her truth. "I won't run away," he shouted. "I won't be part of this injustice that destroys families and dreams." The words echoed like thunder in the stillness of the night. The soldiers stopped, shocked by the audacity of this young woman who refused to submit. Marcos stood steadfastly by her side, a pillar of courage and support. At that moment, Elena revealed something that would change everything. She was carrying letters and evidence that exposed the corruption of the landowners and the brutality of those who oppressed the people. Documents that could spark a revolution. This courageous act not only defied her pursuers, but also lit a fire in the hearts of those around her. The villagers began to awaken from their fear, inspired by this woman who, despite being persecuted, did not give up. It was a moment of revelation and transformation, where the darkness of oppression found an unexpected light. Elena, the noble fugitive, became a symbol of resistance, and Marcos, the revolutionary, her inseparable ally. But the battle wasn't over. That night marked a turning point, and what came next would be even more difficult and decisive. Dawn broke with soft rays of light between the treetops, bathing the village in a distinct warmth, almost like a sigh of relief after the storm. But the air was still thick with uncertainty, because Elena's bravery had lit a spark that could set fire to everything they knew. The once empty streets slowly began to fill with curious glances and nervous whispers. The villagers, who for years had taken refuge in silence and fear, now exchanged words filled with hope. "What if this is the beginning of something different?" they asked each other. Elena, along with Marcos, became a symbol of possible change, a challenge to the injustice that had marked their lives. But with that hope also came the shadow of retaliation. The powerful were unwilling to give in without a fight, and the silent war for the soul of the people was just beginning. As they walked through the central plaza, Marcos whispered to Elena, "This is just the beginning. There's a lot to do, and it won't be easy." She nodded, aware that the real battle was yet to come, but also filled with new strength, the kind that comes when you decide not to be a victim, but rather the protagonist of your destiny. At that moment, Elena looked toward the horizon and reflected, "Do you believe that a single person can change the course of history? If you believe so, share this story and join us in this fight." But before the story could move forward, a messenger appeared in haste, bringing urgent news that would change everything. A new enemy, more dangerous and cunning, was stealthily approaching, determined to crush any rebellion before it even began. The messenger's voice broke the whisper of dawn. "The governor's troops are approaching, with orders to arrest the fugitive and her accomplices." Elena and Marcos exchanged a look that mixed determination and fear. They knew the path they had chosen was fraught with danger, but they also knew they couldn't turn back. What will you do when the darkest shadow tries to extinguish the light you just lit? That was the question the people were beginning to ask themselves, and it now also echoed in the minds of those who heard their story. Thus, the story of the noble fugitive and the revolutionary who protected her remained open, ready to continue with new challenges, new alliances, and the intact hope of a different tomorrow.